to the 5th Internationalization of Higher Education Conference, brought to you by Symbiosis International University and the Association of Indian Universities. This year we are supported very strongly by the World Bank as well as by Obrial Global. Let me now introduce to you Dr. Vidya Yarambekar. She is the Executive Director at the Symbiosis Center for International Education. She is the Principal Director at Symbiosis and the Pro-Chancellor at Symbiosis International University. She's the driving force behind the internationalization, the lady from whom I get a lot of inspiration. Dr. Vidya, over to you.
So thank you, Anita. And we are all extremely excited once again this year with the conference on internationalization of higher education. Last year, I think this was the last public event, physically done event on our university campus. It was on the 6th and 7th and 8th of March. And immediately after that, we were hit so badly by the pandemic that we're still under it. And here we are again virtually meeting. But nevertheless, I think virtual conferences do have their own advantages, and you have a larger audience, you spend less money, you get the best of people to talk to you because they just have to spend a few hours and not really several days traveling from one continent to the other and leaving their work and families. So we're very, very happy that this year we've got a phenomenal response because A, the topic is very relevant, and B, most importantly, it's virtual. And of course, the third and most important thing is that this conference is not just of the Symbiosis International University, but like every year, it is in association with the Association of Indian Universities. We're also supported by the World Bank, and Nina, my dear friend, is here. And of course, by Obrial Global India chapter, which we will talk about more during the network session. And so I'm so happy that, 4 different, organizations, one is a university, others are networks, one is a World Bank, and, we've all come together to discuss about internationalization of higher education in this context. And what we've seen through the last year is how our faculty switched over from a conventional mode of teaching and learning to both faculty and students, I would say, to an online mode of, teaching and learning. And while we were in January and February, and we were hoping and thinking that things are going to move for the good for all of us all across the world, and specifically for India. And we also thought that within the next 2-3 months, our students will join us physically. And we decided that we will move into a blended mode of education because now the faculty were used to online education. And more importantly, students and faculty were excited with this mode of pedagogy. But I'm sorry to say that we're still in the online mode, and hopefully by the next academic year, the Indian academic year, which starts in June, we should move on to a blended education. And then we discussed internally that what kind of blended education, how should it be imparted, what should be the guidelines and norms. And then we realized that I think the biggest advantage of blended education is to get faculty from across the world to teach your students. And therefore we felt that we are actually reimagining internationalization of higher education through this blended education being a catalyst to bring in this aspect of internationalization. And we've always spoken about internationalization at home. We've always spoken about how only the elite students get to travel across the world, spend semesters in some foreign university or do degree programs in some foreign university. And that percentage we all know was just about 2%. But then what happens to those 98% students? And then we always discussed about we should practice internationalization at home. But here we are compelled to practice internationalization at home. And I'm very happy that all students across, all the 100% students on any university campus get this flavor of internationalization through online and blended education. And that's exactly what we want to discuss. But I think the crux of all this is, what happens to the quality? Do you impart the same kind of quality education while you're doing online and blended, or it's the conventional education system that actually conforms to the quality standards of any university? And therefore, we thought that we will have this pre-conference session today, beginning with discussing quality assurance practices world over. And Dr. Bhama is here. I mean, for us, she's like one driving force who drives quality across Symbiosis institutions, and she's going to chair that session. And parallelly, we also have a session where faculty are going to be interested to know various resources that really, that really are going to, help them to bring about this, delivery of online or blended education. And then, of course, a topic that is always debated by academia world over, which is on rankings. And you couldn't have anyone better than the THE, the QS, and the Indian NIRF. And of course, my dear friend Ellen, who's going to actually chair that session. So the pre-conference session is going to be extremely exciting. And of course, from tomorrow on, we have 3 days of wonderful learning for all of us, with the inauguration being done by the Minister of Education himself. And of course, all our partners and their representatives will be speaking at the inaugural. And we have several topics, and I won't go into those details because all of you have those details. But I'm personally very excited because I think we are seeing a sea change in the higher education world over, in the process of internationalization world over. And I would say that for India, with the launch of the National Education Policy just last year, we're really going to see a different education system for higher education in India, as years go by. In fact, most of us at our universities are busy preparing for what this new education policy is going to mean to each one of us and how are we going to implement this new education policy. And one of the important chapters in the new education policy is internationalization of higher education. And fortunately, in India, Symbiosis International University has been in the forefront and, in fact, has been also associated with this committee of NEP to draft the new education policy. So with these few words, I welcome all of you. I'm sure the beginning is going to be very exciting. And over the next 4 days, including today, it's really going to be an academic treat for all of us as academia from across the world. And I personally feel that these kind of virtual conferences are not just impart knowledge, but really create such very strong networks and bonds between various universities, different people from across the world. And here we are, all of us again together to look at, reimagining internationalization of higher education. So thank you very much. I'll carry forward with the proceedings.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya, for that brief but very, very clear and succinct message. And it's true. The pandemic has taught us that wherever we are in the world, whichever country, whatever stage of development we might be, the reality is that there are so many problems that we're facing altogether. Symbiosis International University, as many of you know, was and is an institution that was created for international students. Another aspect of Symbiosis that we are extremely happy with and content with now is the fact that we've committed ourselves to being a health promoting university. And to talk a little bit about the health promoting university and why it's so important, especially during this crisis that the entire world is facing, and especially for higher education institutions. I'm very happy to now welcome to say a few words, Dr. Rajiv Devarika. He's the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences at Symbiosis International University, and the driving force behind all of us as staff and faculty being aware and being committed to the health of not only our students, but the staff and the faculty as well. Dr. Rajiv?
Hello, thank you, Anita. Good morning, namaskar. Guten Morgen, Guten Abend, Guten Tag, Guten Morgen, Salam Alaikum, Bujong. Those are the languages I believe the assembly of the audience consists of today. And of course, back home, Namaskar and Namaste to the Indian delegates. Well, friends, I just want to share with you, you're talking about internationalization, but the pivotal attention which is being drawn globally is that of the corona pandemic. Corona is no longer a problem restricted to a city, state, country, or even a continent. It's a pandemic. Global problem, global concern, therefore demands global combined symbiotic efforts, rightly hosted by Symbiosis International University. Though the cornerstone of prevention of spread of coronavirus is commonly known as SMS in this today's digital world, social distancing, use of masks, and use of sanitizers, there are many additional things one can undertake to prevent the spread of the coronavirus and the disastrous effects of this pandemic. In addition to undertaking many practices which are told to us by healthcare professionals, but even by the paramedics or for the people from the allied healthcare force, be it the nutritionists, be it the wellness professionals, one needs to pay attention to those small preventive measures. Unfortunately, even as a practitioner of modern medicine, I must admit and confess that our understanding of COVID-19 is limited and is changing by the day, if not by the minute. What is today deemed as the gold standard of treatment and care, tomorrow is rendered null and void, and it even comes under a cloud of suspicion and of efficacy. So, what is today valid may not necessarily be held valid tomorrow. And in addition to this, unfortunately, of this pandemic is the infodemic, where we are loaded and doused with information which is not necessarily authentic and evidence based. So, as a health promoting university, it becomes on us, the Symbiosis International University, through its Faculty of Health Sciences, and thanks to Anita and the organizers to have allowed us this liberty of snipping in small snippets covering various dimensions of corona care, be they primary care, be they care which is given by the Department of Medicine, the Department of Respiratory Medicine, the Public Health Department, the Dietetics Department, the Sports and Recreation Department, the Department of Yoga, the Department of Ancillary and Paramedical Healthcare, and most importantly, the Symbiosis University Hospital and Research Center with the Symbiosis Medical College for Women will share with you a minute or minute and a half snippets between two sessions, highlighting above all the savior for today's times, the vaccine, the various types of vaccine, but most importantly, the Sam Peltzman effect, which talks about our lack of resort to safety measures given the apparent cloud of safety. It talks about a safety perception increasing the risk appetite and therefore throwing caution to the wind. And that explains why, even though we are taking vaccines, there are rising incidences and we are facing the dreaded consequence of the second or hopefully not the third wave. So we'll try to make it as lucid, simple, easily understandable, not boring, not technical, because doctors are frequently accused of being technical. Try to giving you some authentic, updated information. Thank you for a patient hearing. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv, and we look forward to little snippets in an understandable layman's language so that all of us can hear. With that, we now move on to the reason why you are here.
Yeah.
We all are concerned about higher education. We're concerned about the quality of the education that we impart, and we all want to be part of a education system, an ecosystem that delivers value and that also makes us happy and satisfied and contented with the kind of work that we do. I'm extremely happy to introduce a woman who's a friend, someone who I've known for many, many years, and brings together, I think, a very strong academic core along with great administrative experience. Dr. Bhama has an academic training in financial management. I'm sure it's much more than that, but that's what I remember her PhD and her work being in. She's also had the honor and the pleasure of being founder director of two very, very successful institutes at Symbiosis, the Symbiosis Center for Management Studies in Pune, which gives a BBA, as well as the Symbiosis School of Banking and Finance. From there, Dr. Bhama moved on to being the Dean of the Faculty of Management, and today occupies the position of being the Dean of Academics as well as Administration. She works with, as Dr. Vidya said, the area of quality. So she's involved in quality assurance at the university level and has also worked with international partners in quality assurance, quality management, benchmarking projects like Equandy, etc. So very happy to hand you over now for the first seminar of IHE 2021, which is on global perspectives on quality assurance. Over to you, Dr. Bham.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all present here from wherever you are across the globe. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this pre-conference seminar on global perspectives on quality assurance. This is a precursor of the conference on reimagining higher education, blended learning as a catalyst. Now, to present quality assurance perspectives in this, in the context of disruption, we have with us three very distinguished experts. Welcome, Maria. We are very, very happy to have you with us. Our next speaker is Dr. Jeffy Mukaro. He is the Executive Director, External Quality Assurance, Council for Quality Assurance and Accreditation in Higher Education, Mozambique. Dr. Jeffy Mukaro is an educationist with a PhD on the development and implementation of qualifications frameworks and systems of quality assurance from Edinburgh, the UK. He was a postdoctoral research fellow in education and skills development research program at the Human Sciences Research Council in South Africa. He has extensive research experience and quality assurance experience in the area of development of qualification frameworks, including one for technical and vocational education training and another for higher education qualification sub-framework. Being on several committees, he has contributed significantly to the African standards and guidelines for quality assurance under the Harmonization of African Higher Education Quality Assurance and Accreditation Initiative. Dr. Jeffy, we are very, very happy to have you with us. You have both an academic background, a researcher background, and a quality assurance expertise because of your experience. We are very delighted to have you with us. Our third speaker is Professor Gerardo Blanco. He is the Academic Director, Center for International Higher Education, Boston College, USA. Dr. Gerardo is also an Associate Professor and a Fulbright Specialist. As an interdisciplinary scholar, his research explores the intersections of quality and internationalization in higher education and has been published in the top international journals in the fields of higher education and comparative education. He has received the Best Research Article Award and has also received honorable mentions in 2014 and 2020. He has held leadership roles in the Comparative and International Education Society, the Association for the Study of Higher Education, and the NAFSA Association of International Educators, and serves on several editorial boards, including the journal Quality in Higher Education. But before I hand over the floor to the speakers, I would like to set the context with the help of a brief presentation. We are basically talking about how perspectives on quality assurance are influenced by certain factors which will keep changing with the changing context, the changing national context and changing global context. So we are talking about four main aspects that will actually influence the quality perspectives of all quality assurance people of HEIs across the world. These four aspects are the purpose of higher education, the quality attributes of higher education, quality assurance processes and procedures, and the national and global context. The dynamic interplay between these four factors will actually impact quality assurance perspectives. And during the course of this pre-conference seminar, what we are going to look at is how does the dynamic interplay between these four factors, how do they actually impact quality assurance perspectives, particularly in the COVID and post-COVID context. So let's start with each of these factors. I'll try and give you a very brief overview. We are all familiar with these concepts. I'm just going to give a brief overview just to set the context. We start with the first purpose, the first factor, that is the purpose of higher education. What is the purpose of higher education? If we were to ask the stakeholders, it would probably depend on the lens that you're looking through. Who do you identify yourself as? So if you are a student or an alumni, what will matter to you and what you expect from higher education is possibly work and career and intellectual development. For a faculty, however, it would be research opportunities that the workplace offers, intellectual and career development. An employer is probably looking at competent workforce and employable skills from graduates who pass out of the higher education institutions. The community will probably be looking at economic development, how societal issues are being solved by HEIs through their research and their engagement. The government is actually looking at justification for funding, stakeholder protection, inclusion, and justice. Alternative providers of education may be looking at short-term education that enhances skills. While each one of them is right from their own standpoint and perspective, when you look at it from the lens of higher education institutes or regulators, the purpose of higher education has wider implications. Higher education institutes have to ensure that the social imperatives are met. That is, providing affordable access to disadvantaged and low-income segments, generating greater awareness leading to improved human development and social indicators, instilling in learners values, attitudes, and belief that support responsible citizenship. We have economic imperatives to ensure, that is, imparting knowledge and honing skills for employment and career, imparting education and skills for enabling entrepreneurship, and also to ensure that there's development of successful economic models at the grassroots level through community engagement. Of course, there are intellectual imperatives where developing the research ecosystem in the university and an intellectually stimulating work environment is our responsibility. Providing holistic education and opportunities for intellectual development of students, engaging with the community and with the industry, building competencies and developing an ability for lifelong learning. So we have a much larger responsibility. So at the core of this commitment of higher education institutes is a heartfelt belief that education is vital to a democratic society, to individual dignity, and a shared responsibility to the community around. If this has to be achieved, then obviously we have to meet stakeholder expectations. And that leads us to the next question. What is quality? Because it's only with quality that we will be able to meet with stakeholders' expectations. What is quality in higher education? I would not want to venture into definitions of quality because there are far too many definitions, and definitions of quality in higher education are actually a little challenging. Challenging because there are so many stakeholders and viewpoints are different. There are so many dimensions to quality in higher education, and it's a dynamic concept. It's not static. And therefore, I would much rather take you through the attributes that influence definitions of quality in higher education. There are a number of researchers who have spoken about a number of attributes as influencers of quality in higher education. But this, I'm taking Laura Schindler et al., their paper, where they have classified all such attributes under 4 categories. The first category is purpose, second is excellence, third is accountability, and fourth is transformation. So what they have done is they have classified all attributes influencing quality in higher education under these 4 buckets. So what is purpose? Purpose is actually conformance to the stated vision and mission of the higher education institute, and conformance to the standards set by the quality assurance agencies and regulators. So here we are actually talking about achievement of predetermined tasks that have already been laid out. The second one is about achievement of distinction and exclusivity. So here we are not talking about just meeting standards, we are talking about exceeding standards. So it's about excellence, achieving an outstanding level of quality. The third one is about accountability. Here, quality attributes are defined with respect to how accountable are HEIs to stakeholders for the judicious use of resources and delivering educational products and services that were promised. So here it's about value for money. And the last bucket is about transformation. Whether we bring about a positive change in the students' learning and whether we unleash personal and professional potential of the students. So here it's about empowerment of the students and transformation of the students. So for all of this, there will have to be indicators to see whether we've met the quality standards. And that leads us to the next question. If we know what is the purpose of higher education, we just spoke about the purpose of higher education, and then we moved on to saying what are the quality attributes of higher education. So with these two in the background, we now move on to what do quality assurance agencies assess in HEIs? What do they look for? Actually, they look for fitness for purpose. And what do we mean by fitness of purpose? Fitness for purpose, I will start with the conformance with stated vision and mission of the HEIs. What are the stated vision and mission statements, and have HEIs met those stated vision and mission statements? To explain this further, I would like to take the quote of Aristotle. Aristotle talks about, this quote talks about an examination. He says, an examination of a knife would reveal that its distinctive quality is to cut, and from this we can conclude that a good knife would be a knife that cuts well. So here, it is all about how well the tool is for the particular task. The tool chosen, how well does it fit the particular task? So I'll take a very simple example. If we are talking about an apple, and if my task is to cut this apple, then I will need a tool that is suitable to cut this apple the way I would want it to be cut. So is this butter knife the right tool? Not really, because it might cut the apple anyways, but not give me the desired outcome. This could be a better tool, and this will give me the results that are desired. And that's not to say that the butter knife is not a useful tool at all. If this is the task, that is to slice the butter, then this tool is the best tool. So if I take an example, now having given this analogy, I would like to take the example from a higher education institution perspective. Supposing my university has a mission of providing trained healthcare professionals, then that's the task I want to achieve. And for this, I will have to offer certain programs. The programs might be a medical program, an MBBS program, a nursing program, a medical technology program. So where we train professionals from across the spectrum. But that is not all. That's just the choice. How well we do it and how trained and equipped our healthcare professionals are, that is actually the test of the pudding. And that is what HEIs actually look for, fitness for purpose. And they also look for conformance with standards set by regulators or quality assurance agencies. For example, we have faculty-student ratios set by UGC. We have some standards set by our quality assurance agencies. How well do we meet with those standards? Now, this is actually the degree of emphasis of external quality assurance agencies on accountability and control functions vis-a-vis your improvement and quality functions. Actually, they not only differ from country to country, they also change from time to time. So the point that we need to note here is the purpose is not cast in stone. It keeps changing, and therefore, because the purpose changes, a whole lot of other things will also change, which is what we are going to see in the next slide. All about evolving purpose. This purpose may keep changing with the national and global context. So you will realize that with changing in national global context, the influence, the assessment indicators of EQA are influenced. And this in turn influences the purpose of the HEI, and how well we achieve that defines the quality. To give you an example, in India, when the Prime Minister spoke about digitalization or Atmanirbhar Bharat, that means self-sufficiency, self-dependency, a lot of it also spoke about innovation and entrepreneurship. A lot of questions in the self-evaluation report were about all these factors. How digital are you? How what digital measures is the HEI actually adopting? Do we have an incubation center? Are we encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship? So all these questions come into play. And because of all of this, there is a gentle nudge to the HEIs to be performing in those areas. And therefore, we are actually preparing our students, our graduates for this national agenda. And how well we do that will define the quality of the program. But while the external quality assurance agencies are doing all of this, we all know that these agencies evaluate HEIs. They also play a mediating role. They send out sector reports to the government, to the users of higher education institutions, programs and products. But what is most important is they play a very facilitating role. They facilitate fostering a quality culture within the HEI. And this is where quality is not just a responsibility of external quality assurance agencies. They help the HEIs to also develop a quality culture and be conscious of quality. Now we move on to the changing higher education landscape, which is actually going to be the subject matter of our conference, because we are now going to try and understand how this changing higher education landscape is going to impact quality perspectives from the point of view of the HEIs and from the point of view of quality assurance agencies and the stakeholders. The global online education market is projected to reach a total market size of around $320 billion US dollars by the year 2025. And why is this growth so huge? It is because of the demand and supply factors that we see in the higher education landscape. There are disaggregated and modularized education. There's a demand for this. There is a demand for low-cost education. There is a supply. The alternative education providers provide good quality education, and there is an availability of industry-relevant certification and the demand for the same. So there are demand and supply related triggers. Then there are these gentle mandates or nudges that we have from the government or from international specialized bodies like the UNESCO. So we have our SDGs, which is urging all HEIs to address all forms of exclusion and marginalization. And therefore, we are actually turning to online and blended learning modes to see whether we can improve the access. For example, the government of India is also talking about encouraging all our HEIs to adopt a lot of MOOCs courses. So SWAYAM is a MOOCs platform in India. So HEIs in India are encouraged to take up these courses. We have enablers like the growing internet penetration and the growing smartphone penetration. Because of all of this, there is an increased adoption of online and blended learning, and this has come to stay. So if all of this is going to happen, until now, all of this was a matter of choice. You know, even though there was a nudge, there is a trend in this direction, it was still a matter of choice at what speed the HEI wanted to adopt it. However, what happened was this COVID-19, which came, and this pandemic had given us this sudden and hard push. It has precipitated the need to adopt and adapt to online teaching. Many of us were pushed into the waters. Some of us learned to swim, others managed to keep us afloat, and I really hope no one drowned. However, there was anxiety, fear, feeling of inadequacy, either with respect to capability, availability of too little time to train and equip oneself, or lack of infrastructure. We now need to learn how to swim comfortably, not just to survive, but to achieve the desired outcome and enjoy the process. That is really to ensure quality. If we were to do all of this, there are some dimensions that need immediate attention. Let's understand that there is now a call to action. The change situation will impact the purpose. In the first slide, I spoke about purpose, I spoke about quality attributes, and I spoke about external quality assurance processes. All of this is going to be impacted with this change. So there is now a call to action. HEIs will now have to provide a conducive environment to adopt and deliver online and blended courses more than ever before. Quality assurance agencies will have to adapt existing procedures or create new procedures to the new models of teaching and learning in order to assure that it is as good as it used to be in the face-to-face models. Some dimensions that need attention in this change context. We will have to see what are the challenges that we will be facing on adoption of online and blended learning. What are the challenges? How are we going to overcome them? How are we going to leverage opportunities that has come with online and blended learning? Preparing faculty for this transformation. How are we going to prepare our faculty? There are threats to quality of higher education delivered through online or blended mode. How are we going to address them? Definitely, there will be a change in the accreditation process of e-learning, and there will be challenges of digitalization of evidence and virtual site visits. To take us through this maze of opportunities and challenges, we have with us our speakers. I will now hand over the floor to our first speaker, Dr. Gerardo Blanco. Dr. Gerardo, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much for this framing of our conversation today. Hello, everybody. It's such an honor to be part of this panel and to be part of this conference. It really is a delight to be sharing with all of you a few ideas. I want to make sure that that I present a perspective, but I also wanted to frame my remarks in the reality that I will be speaking primarily from the perspective of some of these challenges and some of these opportunities as well from the perspective of the Americas, namely Latin America and North America. I think there are some realities that will resonate with all of you, but I also think this is a great opportunity for a mutual understanding, for mutual learning. And I also look forward to engaging with your questions after the presentations have concluded, because I think it is that interactive component that really makes these academic exchanges truly worthwhile. So I really wanted to just start then with a few ideas. I think it may be worthwhile to begin just with very briefly what has been the impact of COVID-19 in the region, both, as I mentioned, North America and Latin America. And really, I think this is not different than the rest of the world. We experience a sudden change with limited time for preparation. And it has been now over a year since most universities in the United States, Canada, and across the whole continent began closing down universities, right? And one of the quick observations, one of the first manifestations that we encountered as a result of this change was that the pandemic was exacerbating existing inequities. And I think this is an important topic for discussion for this audience, because I think the pandemic has really made us aware that there are very significant differences that we need to be paying attention to if we really need to increase the quality of higher education. I think at times in our field, we have moved to a strong emphasis on competition as reflected by rankings, but we don't always discuss quality more in terms of imagine it like a rising tide that elevates all the boats rather than some. And I think we need to move to models of quality that really talk about improving entire higher education systems rather than just a handful of top universities. Because otherwise we create, we make an unequal system even more unequal. We also know that even though we feel optimistic and hopeful about the end of the pandemic, as many vaccines, and we know that India has had a remarkable role in vaccine generation and distribution across the world. So while we feel optimistic, we think that there are still long-term concerns resulting from the pandemic. And I also think it is very important that we analyze what will be the implications for learning and for quality, but to understand this as a system that is interconnected rather than isolated variables. And I think that's really, really important. So what are some of the current challenges? I think it's worthwhile to begin with this. Well, I think we are facing what I would like to describe as a perfect storm of challenges toward quality in higher education. I think in the first, one of the first challenges that we have is that at the current moment, while we see hybrid, online, and remote educational models as a way forward, and they got us through the current crisis, most higher education institutions lack a clear articulation of the support and rewards for high quality hybrid and online teaching. So at best, we are adapting assumptions and practices from face-to-face interaction to the online classroom. We also know that we have unreliable technology at times, and this is not because our universities are not equipped with technology, but rather the pandemic imposed working from home situation that kind of creates significant variability about our work conditions. So we depend on different internet access, different from that on our campuses. We also are working at home when we are more subject to potential interruptions and distractions. But also, I would say, and this happened in the very beginning of the pandemic too, that the number of users increased in such a rapid way that it at times overwhelmed the systems. Even recently, we have had Google outages and Zoom outages, and this has created many times a scramble for identifying contingency plans that are different than the work that we normally would be doing. Also, as you know, the work from home has created challenges for technical support. So while universities may have robust technical support on campus, that becomes very difficult to share when we all are working in our respective homes, as well as we have sometimes absent, insufficient, or inadequate training about the use of technology. And many of us had to teach ourselves, but to do that more on a very fast pace, because we were just trying to catch up to the level of proficiency that our students already had. And then finally, and this is very important, there are very significant workload concerns, right? Because all of this has been done in addition to all the work, to the existing research that we were conducting. And I think it's important that we recognize that all of these changes that have been made, even if they are, even if these are decisions made to better serve students, they also have significant workload concerns for the academic staff. So what are the implications for teaching and learning? I am sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but we have research, of course it's research before the pandemic, that indicates that when courses are converted from face-to-face to online formats, the student satisfaction with the same courses and the same instructors decreases. And I think this is a very important implication to have. This should not discourage us to move more of our offerings to online or hybrid models. We simply need to be aware that it's likely that the level of satisfaction of our students will be lower. So we either need to do more things to successfully engage students, or we need to be prepared, right? And we need not to penalize the specific instructor of the course, but rather trying to more deeply understand what are the sources of this potential dissatisfaction. And I really would like to summarize the responses and what has been happening now for over a year. And a colleague put it in really good terms, in my view, and I attribute this to Professor Robin Grenier at the University of Connecticut, who has described it as doing what we could with what we had from where we were. And I really think this reality has continued to ring true for many of us, because even now we are doing whatever we can to serve our students, to provide the content in the most accessible and reliable way, but we have limited resources to do so. And it's not about what subscriptions our respective higher education institutions have, but rather we have limited sort of capacity to learn different tools. And I think we all are trying to learn something new, but also I have to say this comes with some successes, but also with some failures. And I think we need to increase our tolerance to frustration, because many of the things that we will attempt won't work. Almost every week in my courses this semester, I have received inquiries from students because perhaps the links to the readings are not working, or the assignment that I set up as a video recording, collaborative assignment is not working, or the students are not able to post their final assignments. So there are always these glitches, and we just need to be both gracious to accept that things won't go smoothly. And then secondly, we also need to teach our students that these technical problems are very similar to what they will be facing in the respective professional roles after they graduate. We talk about often employability, and we also talk about non-cognitive skills or soft skills sometimes. I think one of these is being able to recover from surprising malfunction during an event. I think we all have had some practice with that, and I think it's really important to prepare our students for the world of the workforce. I also wanted to very briefly bring attention to a recent publication that I recently published with a colleague. And in our recent paper in tertiary education and management, we are discussing right, some of what we describe as two different but competing with each other rationales for assessment in the United States context. And one of them is complying with accountability demands, and the other one is to really explore student learning as the purpose of assessment. And we don't argue that these two rationales or motivations for conducting assessment are contradictory. Rather, what we argue is that in practice, or as they are practiced right now in US higher education institutions, there is a tension, because to put this article in the most sort of brief version possible, what happens is when we think of assessment as complying with accountability, we are tempted to emphasize the strengths of our work, right? We tend to emphasize what is working well. If we really want to use assessment to promote, on the other hand, student learning, we really need to focus on our shortcomings. We really need to focus on the things that are not working well. And as you can see, there is a tension between emphasizing strengths or emphasizing weaknesses. And as a result of this, there is then sometimes a conflict between the practice of assessment when we are seeking to comply with accreditation requirements, with government accountability, versus when we are really trying to promote authentic student learning. And I think as educators, we all need to be aware of this potential tension. So the focus of my research during my career has been on accreditation. And I really think that the changes that we are witnessing at the moment could be classified in two main categories. So when it comes to higher education accreditation, both the what of accreditation and the how of accreditation are changing as a result of the pandemic. First of all, what gets accredited is changing. From the US perspective, this is quite evident in our context. We have a very clear differentiation between institutional accreditation and program accreditation. And this, for the most part, works in a complex environment based on different regions, right? So the whole country is divided in different regions for the purpose of institutional accreditation. However, the program accreditation operates nationwide and even internationally, as some of the largest accreditors, like the accreditors for business and for engineering, AACSB and ABET, respectively, are truly international organizations that recognize programs in their respective fields around the world. However, for the most part, what was accredited were both institutions of higher education and academic programs that were delivered face-to-face, fully in person. So now the object of accreditation is changing because everybody is offering at least hybrid courses, and many are offering remote courses. And accreditation standards were not created except for a few very specific cases to really account for such a high number of online, remote, or hybrid courses. And these distinctions are also important because different institutions in the United States have adopted different definitions of what constitutes each of these types of courses. For example, in many contexts, online courses refer to completely asynchronous instruction. However, a course that happens synchronously on a platform that is also online, like a video conference platform, that is in many cases considered not an online course, but a remote course instead, right? So the technology, it really is supplementing the interaction with the faculty member. But also we have mostly hybrid courses in many universities. So for example, one of the courses I'm teaching this semester meets once every three weeks, and most of the rest of the time, there is a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning. And all of these things present many challenges and adaptations. And then accreditors need to make decisions about these new formats, and that can be a challenge. The how of accreditation is also changing, because I'll focus now only on institutional accreditation. And while this varies from region to region in the US, there are different components and stages, right, for accreditation. First, we have the self-study, right? The institution develops a report about their own strengths and weaknesses, in some cases about the steps that they have taken for improvement since the last time they were accredited. Well, there is also a second step or stage, which is a panel of experts from different institutions visits, right? They get access to the self-study and then they visit the institution. And then they make a recommendation, and then the accreditor affirms that recommendation and issues a decision. Well, each of these aspects has been affected by the current pandemic. First of all, institutions are developing their self-studies when their actors, the different directors of offices, faculty members, are not able to collaborate in person. And as someone who has been involved in the development of these self-study reports, this is very challenging, because the traditional way of doing it is you get everybody in a big conference room and you kind of hash out the report. Then you establish these working groups. So it tends to be a high touch, very collaborative process. And now we need to adapt this to the constraints and opportunities of technology. Then the campus visit is also being affected by technology, as well as then the communication between the visiting team and the accreditor. Right, so all of these things are changing, and they're changing rapidly, and we need to adapt to them very quickly. So what is the implication of all of these? Well, online formats impose a potentially misleading uniformity, right? Because when one is able to visit a campus, we get the sense of how this institution is different than the one that may be down the road, right? We get a sense of the institutional culture, the mission and purpose, and many other things. However, visiting teams and accreditors at the moment can only see squares on a screen. So based on that facade, most higher education institutions look quite uniform, quite similar to each other. And that can be a challenge when our mission is to discern, right? To identify what makes one institution different than the next, so that then we can recognize quality. So what are some implications going from here, right? So here I'm adapting a model by our colleagues Elkin and Stensaker. And really the idea is we need to think about quality work from a new paradigm or perspective. That implies balancing multiple expectations that often will be in conflict with each other. How we understand quality needs to be dynamic. We don't need a rigid definition of quality, but rather a flexible perspective that will allow us to respond to changing realities. So we all need to be problem solvers and innovators. We need to be very pragmatic, right? This is not the time for dogmatism. We also need to embrace open-ended outcomes. And also we need to emphasize individual autonomy, right? We need to move into empowering all university actors so that they can promote quality in the respective corners of the university. So I think I'm just about time. I do want to share my email in case that some of you wish to be in contact. And once again, I just wanted to thank you all for your attention and for the kind invitation to share a few thoughts with you. I look forward to the next presentation and also to having a very engaging discussion with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Gerardo. That was a very, very interesting presentation. The quote that you had shared with your colleague's quote that you had shared with us, doing what we could with what we had from where we were. I'm sure many of us will identify with this, across the globe. Another interesting observation that you made was when students deal with glitches, technological glitches or all those problems, you're actually preparing them for life, for work life, for life itself. That was another very interesting point you made. And the third, of course, there are a lot which we will probably discuss in the course of discussions. But then the other point that I thought was very interesting was the difference between assessment for compliance for accreditation and assessment for student learning, where one is focusing on strengths and others were focusing internally on our own shortcomings to see how it can be improved. Very, very interesting observations, Dr. Gerardo. Thank you so much. I now request Dr. Maria Kelo to please share her views with us. Dr. Maria.
Thank you very much. Let me see if I can. Yes, I hope this looks okay from your side. Yes. Thank you very much for the kind introduction and for the invitation to take part in this important and interesting event, the pre-workshop of this large conference. It's a difficult task to come up after two excellent interventions already. And what I notice is that if anything, this crisis has really made the world smaller in a way. It has brought us together. While it has kept us apart, it has brought us together in the sense that we now really truly face very similar challenges across the globe in terms of higher education and quality assurance. So, of course, some of the things that I will be saying, you will not hear them for the first time. You probably already reflected on them yourselves, but then you have also heard them from the previous speakers. But I'm a Finnish national originally, and in Finnish language we have a saying that goes something like this. Repetition is the mother of all learning. So if there is some repetition, bear with me. I think it's just to underline some important points that we have discovered during this time. So my name is Maria Kelo. I am the director of ENQA, which is the European Association for Quality Assurance. It is a network of over 100 quality assurance agencies and other organizations dealing with quality assurance, mainly in Europe, but also some of our affiliates are located in other parts of the world. ENQA was founded in year 2000, so we celebrated, or we're supposed to celebrate our 20th anniversary last year. We did that online, as many things that we did in the past year. And the ENQA's task is to support members in all kind of things. We have projects, we organize workshops, opportunities to share good practice among the members, and we also contribute to the policy-making processes at the European level that I will say something more about in just a moment. And then, of course, we hope to be contributing also to the development and reflection and development on quality assurance, particularly external quality assurance, which is our key business, being the representative of agencies. Europe has a particular context, and I do want to talk a little bit about that context because it has an impact also on our COVID response. Differently from many other world regions, Europe has quite a solid common framework for quality assurance. And I will just now explain how solid that is and where it comes from. It all is related to what we have had in Europe for over 20 years now, which is the Bologna process, which is a process of higher education reforms with the objective of establishing the European higher education area, which was officially launched in 2010, but it's of course still in the process of making. There are currently 49 higher education systems across the continent of Europe that are involved in that. So it's much wider than the European Union. Some of you might know European Union now has 27 countries. So the European higher education includes all of those plus then over 20 others. So there is a lot of diversity in that. We have countries from a small, tiny country called Andorra between Spain and France to Russia, which I think is the largest country on the globe. We have from Ireland to Cyprus, Armenia, and everything in between. And what we're trying to do in this process is create some kind of harmonization or cohesion of degree structures. We have moved into a bachelor-master structure, which wasn't there in most European countries 20 years ago. Use a common credit system, qualification frameworks, which are referenced to a common European framework so that we understand better at what level exactly a degree is, whatever it might be called. And then, of course, what is of interest today for us is we have a common framework for quality assurance. Diversity, we always say that it is a strength. We love diversity in Europe, but admittedly, it's also a challenge. We have all these different cultural context, history and traditions, both in the which also reflect then on academic culture and traditions and approaches. In terms of quality assurance, we have different levels of autonomy and capacity of institutions for their internal quality assurance, and also different levels of independence and capacity of the quality assurance agency for external quality assurance. And then we have very different quality assurance approaches across even just the ENQA membership, meaning we have systems that are focused on accreditation, either at institutional level or program level. We have institutional audits, we have different evaluation methodologies, and also these processes can have very importantly different outcomes. In some countries, you have to pass accreditation to be able to operate. In some other countries, there might be an audit system, and everything it does is simply to provide advice. So there is actually no legal consequence whether you pass that audit or not. So when we talk about quality assurance, we don't necessarily talk about the same thing across the whole continent, let alone globally. So that's why it is particularly important to have a common framework so that we can still, even with all this diversity, have some kind of a sufficient basis for trust. So, we might be very different, but as long as we agree that the most important principles are respected by all, there is a sufficient trust so that we can have mobility, have recognition of degrees, and we can collaborate as institutions and higher education systems. For quality assurance, the key document that sets the framework for this is called the Standards and Guidelines for Quality Assurance in the European Higher Education Area. Very long name, that's why we all know that by its shorter version, ESG. So everybody in Europe will know, dealing with quality assurance will know what the ESG are about, more or less. And this is the reference framework for agreed practice in quality assurance in Europe. It was first created in 2005 and then revised in 2015 after 10 years of experience, just to see, was it really what we meant it to be? And what is kind of, I think, particularly relevant or specific for Europe is that this was really written by the stakeholders. It was adopted by the ministers in the Bologna process. I think then there were 40 something. But written by the stakeholders, student organization, institution, university associations, and the quality assurance community. And it covers the whole quality assurance remit. It has three parts. One is for the internal quality assurance within the institutions. So it describes how and what the institutions should do to ensure quality internally. Then there is a second part that describes the external quality assurance mechanisms, how they should be, for example, involvement of stakeholders, or that they include always a self-assessment, a site visit by an independent panel of experts, etc. And then a third part, which is really about the quality of the agencies themselves. So it regards things such as resources of the of the agency, its independence from influence, and other elements in that sense. Of course, they are quite generic principles that we have listed in the ESG, so that they allow for different ways to implement them. So we didn't want to create something that would give a straitjacket to countries and different agencies and institutions in very different contexts to do exactly the same thing. But it's the basic principles that provide the sufficient common basis. What is important to know is that they apply to all kinds of higher education provided in the European higher education area, or by providers in the European higher education area, even if they export their education as transnational education. They apply to e-learning, they apply to all kinds of different provisions, micro-credentials, you name it. We hope the ESG will be able to cover that. And one important point is also that these focus on learning and teaching. We know, for example, that many of the rankings, I think there will be another workshop on rankings specifically, use a lot of criteria from research area, which is an important and often considered kind of a key element of institutions. But the ESG specifically focus on learning and teaching, also a little bit as the maybe a bit more neglected area in terms of quality assurance. The key principles, there are 4 listed in the document. And the first one was also already mentioned by Dr. Bama. Higher education institutions not only have an important role for quality assurance, but in the European context, we underline how they have the primary responsibility for the quality of the provision, but also for the quality assurance of that provision. So there's a very strong focus on internal quality assurance. External quality assurance is the vehicle through which the institutions can publicly demonstrate with a reliable measure that they do meet that responsibility. Of course, quality assurance should respond to the diversity of the system, so not providing a straitjacket, be understanding of the different missions and objectives of the institutions, and importantly, support the development of quality culture. So that's why we talk a lot about constant improvement and not only of minimum standards. And the role of stakeholders is particularly important. And I had added another one, which is not listed as a principle, but it is the fundamental element of our system, is that quality assurance agencies should be independent, both from the ministries, let's say, or national authorities, but also from the institutions. What are the key impacts of having such a common framework? Well, one thing is that we can spread good practice through this common framework, meaning that something that might be first identified as good practice will find its way to these common criteria, and therefore little by little becomes a norm. Student participation, still maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago, was like a good thing to do. But then little by little it became considered as a real norm. And so the shift was from good practice to kind of a requirement in that sense. We've also seen a shift from pure quality control to quality enhancement and support, because that's very strongly in this common framework. So also those academic cultures that were more maybe historically more led to quality control have now started to reflect more on enhancement and support for quality. And the strong cooperation with and involvement of stakeholders has really led to an increasing understanding that quality is everybody's business. It's not the quality assurance agency's business first and foremost or only. And so we can see an emergence of a quality culture. And then the responsibility of institutions has led to a stronger ownership on accountability and a better understanding and trust across the different systems. And then along came COVID-19. So we had this solid framework, I would say, and it was this solid framework that in a way saved us in the very turbulent year of the last 12 months or so. In the very early stages, let's say about a year ago, the quality assurance community in Europe felt first individually in different countries, but then when we started to share, we could identify kind of a common approach, that the first important thing was just to be supportive and flexible. We had to allow the institutions to address the most burning issues without burdening them at the same time with all kind of additional questions about accreditation and quality assurance from the external perspective. Secondly, provision of advice and support. That was really called for. How should we deal with e-learning? Can we do this? Should we not do that? And all these kind of things where quality assurance agencies could really be facilitators of dialogue among the institutions, but also to facilitate and moderate the dialogue between the institutions and the policymakers. Because in many countries, laws needed to be changed to allow for online learning, to allow for online quality assurance activities, and to, for example, extend accreditation periods when first everything was put on hold. And a lot of work was put into reassuring institutions, saying, we understand this is firefighting. We don't expect you to do the best possible thing, the best imaginable thing at the moment, but just the best possible one. We are firefighting. And I have here another picture. Some of you might recognize that. It's a picture of ancient Rome. It looks quite different today, but it's a picture of ancient Rome. And I'm referring with this to a saying that says Rome was not built in a day. And when we saw suddenly in the March, April last year, institutions had to close shop just from one day to another. They had to send their students and staff home and start to move their provision online. What we know, however, from all the experience we've had in the past 10 years or so, is that institutions that have had a strategic approach to e-learning in the past years have put a tremendous amount of effort and work and expertise and study to develop proper e-learning programs. To create a good e-learning program does not happen in a day or a week or a month, and probably not even a half a year. It really takes time. So Rome was not built in a day, neither is good e-learning built in a day. And fairly so, we would say that there were concerns raised as soon as March, April last year by ministries, by students, what happens to the quality of learning if it has to be suddenly moved online? And I have been preaching this since then, really, that we have to make a difference between emergency solutions that are better than nothing, for sure, and proper e-learning. The move online might not have, and probably was not, and is not, that emergency move as good quality as the normal face-to-face learning institutions were doing at the time. It couldn't be. But what was the alternative? It was that or really nothing, leaving the students totally on their own. At the same time, also, this forced move online has been a push to move forward on thinking about real e-learning as well. Many institutions or faculties or professors who were hesitant about e-learning, now they just had to go for it. And it has surely inspired many of them in a longer term perspective to consider new approaches for e-learning after the crisis is over. What we could notice in Europe, we have this strong framework. We have a common framework. We have good, solid system in most of the European countries. And in these times of crisis, we could really rely on that good basis of trust that we had spent years to create and enforce. So this is what was not the time to really doubt, to question the institution's goodwill or ability to react in the times of crisis, but trust. You were doing a good job. Now you do what you can, and we're sure you do it as well as you can. And the most important thing was really to invest on dialogue and communication, to tell people what this means, to tell people if this course is still valid, can they still graduate, how is the assessment done, is it reliable, etc. So try to speak as much as possible between the policymakers, the institutions, the quality assurance agencies, students, general public, everybody. And we saw there were a lot of national rather than European level concerns about emergency legislation related to accreditation, recognition, degree statements. But we are working on all that in the different country context. What we have to also be aware of, however, that we need serious monitoring in the midterm to ensure quality beyond times of crisis. Like I said, what was good enough in the times of crisis might not be at all good enough in a kind of stable, established situation in the longer term. So we have to be wary about that. Quality assurance has also had to change. Of course, we also had to all stay at home. We had to close the shop. We couldn't travel. It's part of the European system that there is a site visit where a panel of independent experts travel to the institution and visit that and spend time with all the different stakeholders at the institution. We couldn't do that anymore, and certainly not physically. The first reaction was to move everything, to stop everything, because we thought it might be 2 months, 3 months. We were hopeful still at that time. And then when we realized this will not be over in a moment, to move online. And it has been a challenge, and it has been an opportunity. It really has been an opportunity to rethink the reviews and its different elements. What is the role of the experts? What do they have to do? What is the purpose of the physical site visit? How long should it be? Maybe we can focus it differently from where we used to do that in the past. And of course, we have in all elements of our work reflected on rationalizing travel overall. In this sense, also fitness for purpose. Does it really make sense to travel for this or that event or occasion? And also realizing that sometimes that is really the best way to get good quality information, get a grasp of the institution, for example. There's wide agreement that although we don't really know how the future will look, that we can see a hybrid model for quality assurance in the future, or different hybrid models in plural. They could be hybrid by procedure type. Maybe initial accreditation could be paper-based or distance-based, and then the follow-up could be maybe face-to-face. Maybe it could be divided by origin of reviewers, enabling many countries to involve international experts in their external quality assurance without additional cost, which is always an issue. But perhaps more fruitfully by purpose or stage of the review process. Do we really have to travel, make 5, 6, 8 people travel to a university to look for facts or check kind of factual information? That could be probably done virtually. But then to have a real dialogue with the stakeholders, to really sniff the air around, see how is it really to be in that institution? Maybe that's best done at the site visit. And then we are asked all the time to have some guidelines on how to do the good online site visits, how to share good practice on those in concepts, in the technical elements, experts, structure of the visit, and so on. So we are working on all that, but it's still early days for us as well. And I'd be happy to share more of our results of studies we are doing now with the agencies at a future date. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maria. Very, very interesting perspectives. You gave a very succinct overview of the European network role, particularly during the COVID times. Your observation that HEIs are primarily responsible for the quality, for ensuring quality, is also very well noted and taken. What I also liked very much was the way you have reflected, the quality assurance agencies in Europe have reflected on the short-term requirements, the medium-term requirements, and long-term requirements in the context of COVID. That was a very, very understanding viewpoint that you'll have taken, and a very facilitatory role that you'll have played. It was wonderful to listen to you. I'm sure there will be some questions on how you'll have managed, visits and all of that. But while we wait, before that, let me invite. Thank you so much for the role, for your discussion, by the way. And I now invite Dr. Jeffy Mukura, Director of the CNAQ Council of Mozambique. So we've now heard the American perspectives, the European perspectives, and now I invite Dr. Jeffy to share with us the perspectives from Africa, Mozambique. Welcome, Dr. Jeffy.
Okay, thank you so much. for the invitation, and thank you so much for all the support in the preparation of this conference. I had some few difficulties from this side. I don't know whether you can share my screen from that side, the chair.
Yeah, we will. Yes, we will do that.
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. So I'll be talking about external quality assurance of higher education in Mozambique in times of COVID-19. Can you go to the next slide, please? And the purpose, the objective of this presentation is mainly to share with the international participants of this conference our experience about external quality assurance of higher education in Mozambique in terms of COVID-19. And I've got 3 points to share with you during this presentation. A brief introduction about who we are, the quality assurance agents for higher education in Mozambique, and what was our response to COVID-19 and some of the challenges we have experienced. And as the last speaker of this panel, some of the challenges has been expressed, and like my predecessor had said, repetition is not that bad. So some of the things we have already had, you can expect to hear them again. Next slide. In terms of what we are a quality assurance agents for higher education in Mozambique. And this quality assurance agency is the implementing and supervisory body of our quality assurance framework for higher education, which was developed in 2007. And also, this quality assurance agency is responsible for the higher education qualifications framework, which was also developed in 2010. But the minister responsible for higher education passed the responsibilities of these higher education qualification frameworks to the quality assurance agency for higher education. And this agency is a technical and administrative autonomy. It is guardianship of the minister who oversees the area of higher education. In this case, is the Minister of Science, Technology, and Higher Education. And the principles of our quality assurance system, credibility, transparency, autonomy, exemption, dynamism, and authority. And this system is specific deliberative and regulatory functions, ensuring the harmony, cohesion, and credibility of our quality assurance system and of our higher education qualification system, and how well the quality of higher education is monitored. Next slide, please. And in terms of our mission and vision, our mission is to promote the evaluation, accreditation, development, and registration of higher education qualifications as mechanisms of quality assurance in view of the country's development needs and in line with the quality standards of higher education in the country, the region, and the world. And our vision is to be a reference institution in the field of assessment, accreditation, development, and registration of higher education qualifications at national, regional, and international levels. Next slide, please. Thank you. And what was our experience in terms of external quality assurance in this time of the pandemic? We all know the pandemic in March 23, 2020, the President of the Republic of Mozambique suspended all classes at all levels as a measure to prevent and contain the spread of COVID-19. And it meant that from primary to higher education, everything was closed. But there was a general consensus between stakeholders that teaching and learning should continue with the use of information and communication technology. And the government's concern in this regard was issues of access and quality of provision, especially the blended e-learning. And just a brief overview of our higher education system in Mozambique. We've got 53 institutions which are in operation, and we've got approximately 230,000 students with approximately 890 programs and 14,000 lecturers who are teaching in higher education, and 5,900 of them are full-time. And next slide, please. And what was our first response when the government announced the closure of all levels of learning, including higher education? We as a quality assurance agency, we postponed all the site visits. We postponed all the technical assistance and the monitoring of the implementation of improvement plans, because when we do accreditation or audits, the external reviewers, they recommend improvements to be made, and the institution should implement improvement. They should have improvement plans, and one of the functions of our agency is to monitor if those improvement plans are being implemented. So we postponed all that, and also there was an extension of accreditation periods because of uncertainty of the pandemic. And as I've said earlier on, the general consensus was that teaching and learning should continue online. And the concern was quality. And as a quality assurance agents, what did we do? We carried out a survey to collect data on teaching and learning conditions in the context of the emergency and on its potential to ensure quality learning. So this survey was directed to teachers, lecturers, and students to see how prepared the teachers were, how prepared the students were, and with what technology they were using, and if the lecturers were trained, if the students were trained to use the technology and all that. And we also managed to classify and do the mapping exercise of modules and disciplines that were offered online. Because we know there were other challenges, for example, technical subjects like engineering, medicine, and all that, where even though theoretical learning, there were no plans for practicals at that moment. So we were assessing to see which discipline can go to the next stage, or they need to do a recuperation plan. So we did this mapping exercise to see which disciplines were being offered, which disciplines were not offered, and for those who were offered, how much of the content was covered and how many students were participating. So if we realized that no, this discipline, few students are participating, we give in support to teaching staff and students, especially in the use of the technology, those competencies, digital competencies, so that they can know how to use the technology to have access to online learning and teaching. And I will later on share with you some of the results of the survey we have carried out. And that was our first response. And our second response was, we thought this was only going to take 3-4 months, but then the crisis continued. And our second response was, well, we cannot continue this because if lessons are going on online and to accreditations, they need to be accredited before they are offered, and institutions were pushing for new courses online. So we adapted a new external quality assurance practice where my colleague from ENQA is already talked about the issues of what exactly happens when a site visit is carried out. The panels normally carry out interviews with the stakeholders when they get to the site. They analyze evidence, physical, paper evidence, and they also visit infrastructure, buildings, laboratories, and all that. And then we said, okay, all these activities which they are doing when they are on a physical site visit, 80% of that can be done online. For example, interviews with students, with lecturers, with administrative staff can be done online. And we also thought of, okay, we are also implementing the digitalization of evidence, that every documents which are needed as evidence, they can be posted online, and the panel members will have access to that information. And we also had to adapt some of our standards and guidelines to focus more on the use of technology in the process of learning and teaching, and ICT infrastructure, the preparation of the teachers, the students, and all that. So we adapted that. It was very African context, in the context of Mozambique, to do virtual site visits. Other countries in Europe developed, they use drones, for example, to do site visits, virtual site visits. But it was very difficult for us. But then we said, okay, instead the whole team so I think let us, if they read out the interviews, but what lacks is physical structures like that, to just send a specialist in the area and one to verify. So we reduced the number of participants during the site visits, and when they get there, they could use videos and all that to show the other panel members who are not traveling to discuss some of the challenging issues. So that was our second response, and we by December about 20 programs using this adapted model of external quality assurance, doing every version of physical structures, which were done by a limited number of people who could travel to the site, where laboratories and other physical structures were a requirement according to our regulations. Next slide, please. And now, can you please share the next slide? Thank you. Hello? Okay. Yes, we are now, I will now show you, I've talked about the results of the survey we've done to verify if the conditions were created for online teaching and learning. And in addition to the difficulties in assessing the appropriate computing devices for e-learning and connectivity, these were the many problems: connectivity and access to the the computing devices. But also some challenges were identified that denounce the need to strengthen the leadership and the pedagogical management capacity of teaching and learning processes using information and communication technologies. And among others, we can note that identification and effective use of technological resources suitable for the training to be offered was key. It was very difficult to say what technology are you using for this. So most of them were just mentioning Zoom, but that is not really the issue when we are talking about blended e-learning. And also another challenge was the adaptation of teaching material and learning materials. Okay, why? Because our lecturers and students were used to face-to-face teaching and learning. But now if you transform that into online learning, the way students learn online, the way teachers teach online is different. Things are changing. So there should be adaptation of the teaching and learning materials. So we discovered that the lecturers were not adapting. They were just using the same slides they were using during face-to-face and all the activities during face-to-face to use it on Zoom. And they said they were implementing blended e-learning. And also control and management of student participation was a need, especially if students are learning and online. There's need to have a plan of control and management of their participation, and also evaluation and feedback of students was identified, and the monitoring the teaching and learning process. Also, these were the 5 key areas which were identified as challenges in the implementation of online teaching and learning. And what we did was we designed a project which we managed to get funding from the World Bank to see how we can train teachers in pedagogical innovation with the use of technology in order to implement the blended e-learning, especially in teaching them how to adapt the materials, in teaching them how to identify effective technology, to how to carry out evaluation and monitoring during. Sorry, next slide, please. Yes, in this slide, I will try to share some of the strengths and limitations of our external quality assurance practice, especially on online visits we have adopted. These strengths and limitations were obtained during a focus group discussion with the panel members who participated in this process from October last year until February 2021, to find out what their experience were, and also institutions which participated in the evaluation of these 70 programs I've indicated. So one of the strengths which were identified was reduced travel, both for the panel members and the agent staff. Like I've said, it's only one member of the panel, and together with the technical staff from the agents who can do the travel to verify physical evidence. And also they were talking about the flexible timing options to carry out these interviews, and also there are few logistical preparations which are needed and all that. So there were some of the strengths which we got from our focus group discussions with the panel members and the institutions that participated in the evaluation. And some of the limitations that were noted was the preparation of online visits. It can be time consuming, connectivity and access to technology. Once again, it's an issue because many interviews were disrupted because institutions on the other end could not have good internet connectivity, and even the evaluators themselves were facing a problem. So the process, instead of just taking 1 hour, it could last forever, trying to connect, reconnect, and all that. And also online fatigue on the part of the evaluators and also the participants on the other side. And also what you can say, which has also been identified by the other speakers, about limited options to review evidence, for example, building and others, because one person will only go, but the rest of the members might not have that opportunity to review the evidence physically. And the lack of personal experience, that corridor talk, which normally the evaluators, they do, and the lack of context experience, because you see, to understand, to evaluate something, quality is a contested issue. So without the context in which the process of learning and teaching is taking place, it might be very difficult. And some of the success factors which have been identified is that if you need these online visits to be successful, more preparation and technical support by the agents is needed, especially to prepare the external reviewers, to prepare the institutions that are participating in the process, how to prepare evidence, digitalization of evidence and all that, and also to explore different options and creative approaches for virtual visits. We are looking at our partners in Germany to see what they are doing using drones, to see if we can also adapt that in our country. And also one of the key success factors which has been pointed out in the study is there should be a clear communication strategy, both for the reviewers and for the institutions that are participating, what it is and what it is not. I thought it was very important for me to share this information with you. And my last slide was to say that blended e-learning is here to stay. And there's no going back. It's a paradigm shift, even if the pandemic or COVID-19 could one day go away. But I think blended e-learning should stay with us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jeffy. Three very quick points that I take away from your presentation. It was very interesting to note that CNAQ is a supervisory body to oversee the implementation of higher education qualification framework. It is also in charge of accreditation process. So it's looking at both. That was an interesting observation you made. The second one was it's very heartening and interesting to note that you actually conducted a survey amongst the higher education institutes to understand the challenges that were faced, and you shared the results with us. And the third point was about the last slide, the last but one slide, where you spoke about the strengths, limitations, and the key factors that will lead to the success of online accreditation processes. That was also very, very well received. Thank you so much. Now it's time for our question answer session. While there are a number of questions, I think we are limited by time. So I will have to ask only, I have the time to ask only one question per speaker. And I would request you to keep the answers very short, maybe a minute and a half, please. So I'll start with Dr. Gerardo. The question is from Dr. Yogesh Chandra Goswami. His question is, blended learning will definitely change the teaching learning process. Do you believe that in future we may create a pool of good specialized teachers across the world to help students in a new concept of global learning?
I think so. I am quite optimistic about the future, indeed, and I think we all are not. I really think I probably would like to reframe some of these conversations, right, from having experts to, rather than having a few experts, I would rather all of us to develop some level of expertise. right? And of course, there is always that room for the big experts, but I think we all could be lowercase experts in the different sort of like approaches. I also think the opportunities of blended learning will only be realized if we also move into more active and collaborative approaches and more sort of socially constructed understandings of learning. So I think that should be the agenda for the future. I am quite optimistic. I also think in terms of specifically global learning, there are many opportunities that are enabled by these virtual and blended approaches.
Thank you so much. I like being the lowercase expert. It's very nice. The second question is to Dr. Maria. This is from Mr. Ashok Bose Murkawa. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correct. Does ENQA have any guidelines which institutions can use for the internal quality assurance processes in the during the COVID pandemic?
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I will not be able to satisfy your request. We don't have any guidelines for internal quality assurance, also because we have this division of labor in Europe. So we take care of the external quality assurance. And while our agencies help the institutions with the internal quality assurance at the European level, it is our sister organization called the European University Association, EUA, that I'm quite confident they have published already some guidance on institutional quality assurance on that. As I finish now, I will look for it. And if I find it easy, I will post it on the chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. The third question is for Dr. Jeffy. How have you all dealt with the situation of inequality in society to promote a comprehensive education in the population? How have you dealt with a system of the inequality? I think it's basically about how have you dealt with challenges where access to all facilities were not available, and how did you deal with this inequality?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. A little bit challenging as well, but the issue of inequality was a cause for concern because our system, our education system, is more inclusive. So where it is inclusive, we realized that with the use of technology, there are some remote areas where access issues, connectivity issues are concerned, and we've got students there. So how do you deal with that? So what we've done was to make sure to negotiate with our service providers so that they can have internet for free on those areas, and the government has adopted one computer, one laptop to those needing students, so that they've got free credits to use, and they also have access to the computers. So I think we are trying to deal with that inequality issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jeffy. Dr. Maria, I note, has already put it in the link in the chat box, which is what all of us can access. Thank you so much, Dr. Maria. As we now draw, because there's absolutely no more time, where we would have gone on with more questions, there's absolutely no more time, and I know Anita will actually shut it off very soon. So before she does that, let me thank you all very much, dear speakers. I thank you all for sharing your views and also for taking all those questions. I wish we had a little more time for more questions, but thank you very much. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the organizing team for meticulously planning and for the support that they extended to us before and after and during this session. Thank you all very much. And we do hope that the other questions that are unanswered will get addressed during the course of the next 3 days of this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bhama. Thank you, panelists, for an absolutely insightful session. I think IHE 2021 is off to a great start. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, Dr. Bhama, for shedding light on this. This is something that, as educators, as academics, the world over, we have started these conversations. Each one of you has brought a lot to the table. As far as the participants are concerned, keep up the good work. Keep putting in those comments in the chat box. We will take whatever we can. Even panelists, and this is what I'm going to say over the next 3 days, even your comments, are more than welcome because there's much that we can learn from the chat box in addition to, and this is something that we've learned in class, right? That the chat box sometimes brings a lot to the table, but thank you very much. We are now going into a little break. And at 6:30, we will be back. But before that, as Dr. Rajiv Yerodekar told us, he's going to be giving us a few tidbits to deal with COVID. And therefore, before we go into the break, I think he has 30 or 40-second little video that is available. Back at 6:30, so you have around 25 to 27 minutes to go grab a cup of coffee, a sandwich, medu vada if you're in India, or wherever, or just walk around. Do come back at 6:28 because Professor Ellen Hazelcorn is going to be having a conversation that we all are interested in, and that's about rethinking rankings. And rankings is something that we all have a love-hate relationship with. Each one of us has an opinion about it, and therefore do come back. But before we end, let's run a little video that Dr. Rajiv's department has sent us. Akshay, if you could run that little fun video. Tweet rather than meet, do tweet about your experience at IHE as well. Simple things, the things that we need to remember. So cup of coffee, sandwich, whatever, gets you to relax. Do come back 6:28, 6:29 for the last session of the day, which will be on rethinking rankings. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Dr. Bhama, once again.